Welcome once again to Anderson Medicine. This is a great opportunity for us to look behind the scenes at medicine. We talk a lot about sports medicine. Today we've got a jewel. We've really got talking about the Cincinnati Ballet. Cincinnati has been blessed to have a professional ballet since 1963. In fact, last season was the 50th anniversary of the season. We have athletic trainer and director of Pilates from Mercy Health, Jackie Haas. And Jackie is known throughout the Athletic Trainer Association. She wrote the book. Whenever she speaks, trainers stand in line to talk about something called dance medicine.
Right.
We're also so blessed to have Suzette Boyer-Webb, a former principal dancer with the Cincinnati Ballet, who is currently the Cincinnati Ballet II company manager and the Cincinnati Children's Ballet mistress. Thank you both for joining us today on Anderson Medicine. Thank you for being here. And so, Jackie, just to start with, we've talked a fair bit about sports medicine here. So how long have you been with the ballet? You were a dancer yourself. What is your background and how did you end up being a trainer?
Right. I danced with Cincinnati Ballet from 1983 to 1989 and then went back to school at UC for athletic training. I wanted to combine my background in dance, because I had been dancing since I was a child, with health education, and athletic training was a perfect fit because I still wanted to work with the company, and it made for an interesting and really good career transition for me.
Was there a trainer prior to you, or were you the first?
We had a physical therapist that worked with the company, but she never came on site. So it was kind of the first one, yeah.
So in 1989, it was actually not normal for a lot of NCAA sports teams to have their own personal trainer. Does dance medicine kind of almost precede, in some cases, some of the sports medicine that we've seen?
Well, dance medicine officially has only been around, I'd say, a good 20 years because no one took their injuries seriously. And it wasn't until professional companies started seeing really kind of catastrophic injuries that would take dancers out. They couldn't perform. Then they'd have to find a backup, and it started costing money for the companies. So then performing arts medicine, athletic trainers that were interested in dance medicine started popping up and trying to help work backstage, be available for dancers to help with rehab and post-rehab and conditioning. So
there's a training room there.
Yep.
So how many people you have in there at any given time? And
it depends. Before class, usually around 9 o'clock, there could be a third of the company in there trying to kind of warm up and get ready for class. Because their class starts at 9:30 every day, and then they rehearse until 6:15 or so. So they like to come in and do some elliptical, get their blood flowing a little bit, and kind of pre-warm up.
So Suzette Boyer-Webb, thank you this is a real honor and privilege to be here talking with a principal dancer. Could you just what is a typical day like for a professional ballet dancer?
Okay. Jackie just alluded to the fact that a lot of times dancers will spend the morning warming themselves up a little bit even before their class, and the class is considered to be a warm-up and prepares the dancer for their day. A lot of times the dancers will, do heat or cold or warm up with, all kinds of exercises and everything. And then they'll progress to an hour-and-a-half long class, which is a combination of training in the technique as well as the warm-up to prepare them to rehearse for everything they need to do during the day. The dancers then rehearse 3 hours. They have an hour off for lunch and then do another 3 hours. So it's a pretty grueling schedule, and it's 5 days a week. And then, afterwards everyone is icing and taking care of everything else that needs to be taken care of after that kind of day.
So is the class, is it all choreography of something coming up? Is it conditioning, strengthening, flexibility?
Class involves most of that. The ballet class itself has come about through the French technique, French vocabulary. And so a typical ballet class is similar for anywhere you go. So if I went and took class in Russia, or if I went and took class in Japan, or here in the United States, it would all follow pretty much the same order. the steps would be put together a little bit different, but it would progress along the same line. It starts out with really big movement that just does a general warm-up to get the legs going, and then you go through the feet, and then you hit the ankle, then you hit the knee, then you hit the hip, and you just generally warm up. Then you move to standing not with the bar, but on your own, then progressing to turning and balancing, then progressing on to jumps and everything for the full strength training.
So I get the sense that probably the most important piece of equipment is your shoes.
For a woman especially, yes.
So I understand that you may actually go through 2 pairs of shoes in a typical performance.
Yes.
So how do you work them in? Are they like, how do you do this?
Well, most female dancers, when they're on point, their shoes are handmade for them with various makers throughout the world. And so 9 times out of 10 dancers have, I would say, 4 or 5 pairs of shoes at varying stages of broken in, being the hardest for things that they have to do a lot of releves up and down, or things where they're moving really quick and want a really strong shoe. Then if they're doing slow adage movement, they want a shoe that's really softer. So it depends on the dancer. It depends on the size of the dancer, the flexibility of the foot, and then what the choreography is, and that's how they would pick their shoe for each particular thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you go up on point, what kinds of muscles and things? How do you do that?
It's funny when you think about it, because as a kid, all you want to do is get on point, and all you want is your first pair of point shoes, until you realize how hard it is and how much it hurts. And eventually, what I tell my students a lot is, not only do you have to warm up your foot, but you have to warm up the shoe, because the shoe becomes pliable to your foot. So you're using, you're starting with everything. The core is the most important thing to get you up there, but then everything else has to be, used through the foot, through the ankle, all the muscles.
Gastroc,
You can
soleus,
give me the
Achilles,
details.
yeah. All the little intrinsic muscles in their feet have to be really toned and really strong. Typically, their gastroc is incredibly strong. Not so flexible because they're in plantar flexion, or they're all the way up on their point. Inner thighs, glutes, external rotators, lateral rotators, they're all really strong to be able to, because the tip is like the size of a quarter. So they also have to have incredible core strength to maintain their balance up there.
And so sometimes you see you standing, sometimes you see you walking. Is it more difficult to stand still, or to actually walk when you're on point?
It's both. Surprisingly, the way a point shoe is made, there's a very small shank, leather shank. So the dancer has to really use all of this lateral to really figure out where they are. So even that takes a long time for a young dancer to build up to figuring out how to maintain that flatness. Then, everything else builds on that.
So you've been a manager, and could you go up on point today? I'm sorry to ask. Just curious.
I could if I was holding on tight to something, yes. But no, I have not been in point shoes in over 25 years.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, during a performance, what happens? Are you backstage? Is there a medical team there? And how does that work?
Yeah, for probably 25 years, I was there for every show, and I had a kit with some electric stem, some ultrasound, whatever tape I might need. Kelly Jo now comes and covers all the shows. So the Aronoff is great about giving us a little space so that we have a treatment table, and we bring foam rollers and TheraBands, whatever kind of tools we can carry that we can use to do treatments beforehand, and then sometimes treatments during the show and between intermission and whatever they need. So yeah, it's busy. About half hour before the show, it's pretty busy down there.
Really?
Yeah.
So if a dancer is injured on stage,
Right.
Do you go out and take care of them? What do you do?
No, they have to either get off stage. We've had them roll off in the past. If they're dancing with a partner and they hear a pop or a snap and they can't bear weight, the partner carries them off. They may even just pull the curtain down, but no, we would never go out. There's no timeouts. You can't really run out and stop the clock. So, but we get them off and then immediately have to make a decision if it's something we can work them back in, or do we need to throw that costume on somebody else and throw somebody else out there. So it just all depends on the level of the injury.
So our dancers, is there always like a standby person for every role?
There's a lot of understudies or second casts of the different roles, and then there's also our second company is learning the third or fourth or fifth cast. So if, for instance, 2 other people were involved in something else that have already covered that, someone else could still cover.
And so, could you talk about some injuries that you've had, if you're comfortable doing that? And
Yeah, my most recent injury as a non-dancer, I was in rehearsal demonstrating something for our second company. We were getting ready for Luminosity, and I went to do a releve going up on half point and slid as I went up and rolled my ankle and immediately heard a pop. Knew something, I'd never had anything like this before, knew something was up, dropped to the floor, and it ended up being a torn peroneal tendon and a fracture.
You had a talus fracture.
so talus is the back part of the ankle, and so, like, was that like an enthesopathy there? Of the and how? So as the master of the ballet, you have to demonstrate the choreography, and
often, yes,
Yeah.
or at least give it, as I alluded to earlier, the the vocabulary of ballet is in French. So if I say I would like you to do an arabesque or a plie or a releve, the dancers know what I'm talking about. But if I say I want you to do, a 1940s swing move, I kind of have to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So that was kind of where I was going at that point, and so. You do have to use your body. You have to give visual cues to dancers. That's really important because it's such a visual art form.
So when you're teaching choreography, how much of that could you write down, and how much of that do you simply demonstrate and do what I do, and I mean, could you actually write down this is a dance?
I could. I mean, and I do that as I'm choreographing, so I know how I'm organizing things spatially. But at the same time, there is a lot of demonstration, or to give them an idea of what the style is like, or something like that. There is a lot that just has to be done physically.
So we can't help but notice how thin ballet dancers are. And in fact, we actually have a friend who's a former New York City ballet dancer who said she lived on cigarettes and Coke, Diet Coke.
Yeah.
And is that an issue? I mean, are nutrition and other things part of kind of what you do as part of the ballet?
Yeah, we like to keep an eye on them, and it's important that they are thin, but they have to be strong. So they're dancing 6-8 hours a day, so they're burning a lot of calories. A lot of them eat really well, actually. It's portion control, and then they work it off. So, and they're healthy. Every now and then we'll find someone that has a little disordered eating, or maybe hides eating, and then you have to keep an eye on them. But for the most part, these guys are pretty healthy. They do the elliptical a lot. They do Pilates a lot. And they come down for the lunch hour with a real sandwich. It's not like a half of an orange. It's a real meal. So and a lot of them like to cook. So but they're just really healthy and really busy and really active. They're eating less and moving more.
Yeah. So typical athletes. So
right.
I would mention that Cincinnati Ballet is covered by Wellington Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, and the medical director is Dr. Paul Favorito,
right.
Who in his spare time is the team physician with me for Anderson High School.
Right.
And so Paul actually traveled with the ballet some number of years ago to Russia or the Soviet Union when the ballet went there, and he tells his story, and I always want to know if it's true that he decided to be generous and take the dancers out for a meal.
Yes, he did.
And each 3 dancers ate one meal.
Yeah.
It's the cheapest. His family couldn't eat for that amount of money. I mean, is that a real story? That really happened?
Yes. He took them out to dinner, and he was really surprised at how much they did not eat and how cheap it was to take them all out. So he was very kind to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. So if you're just joining us, you're watching Anderson Medicine, and we have a great one with head trainer for the Cincinnati Ballet, Jackie Haas, and former principal ballet dancer, Suzanne Boyer-Webb, who currently is the children's ballet mistress. And what does that mean? That's a cool term. I would love that, mistress. There's not too many jobs that have that.
Exactly. It comes out of the apprentice type of system. So the children's ballet mistress is the one that rehearses children, auditions, teaches, stages, choreography for the different ballets. So typically Cincinnati Ballet does probably, I'd say, at least 2, maybe 3 ballets a year that involve children. And so I will audition for them, stage the roles. You know, the most famous obviously is Nutcracker. We have probably, I think 86 children in Nutcracker in each cast, and we usually have multiple casts. So it's a lot of moving children around.
So you're the coordinator of the kids in the Nutcracker.
Yes.
What a job. that is.
It's actually a very rewarding job, I do have to say that.
So in sports medicine, part of the trainer's job is to talk with the coach. And so Victoria Morgan, the president and head of the ballet, do you have to go, because a lot of trainers have to go and tell the coach when there's an injury and they dread that. And
Yeah.
is that part of what you do?
The athletic trainer definitely has to help coordinate care. And if the dancer is not comfortable discussing it, then we have to do that, just to keep them updated. And we also want to make sure, like Kelly Jo follows them and takes them to the doctors so that the communication is there. We hear what the doctor says so that the dancer can't get it confused and then talk to the artistic staff. So that way we can keep it all straight. We know when they need to be out, when they need to come back, the exact diagnosis, how many weeks it might be. So it's helpful, yeah. We talk to choreographers or whoever's running the rehearsal.
So Suzette, you're kind of working with the next generation. Is there in dance, I mean, you start extremely early and you move up. When you're working with the kids, are you conscious of potential injuries? Do you do things to try to mitigate that?
Oh yeah, working with both the children and the second company, which are young dancers, those dancers are typically 18 to 24, you're working on trying to be sure that the class or the choreography that you have is presented in such a way so that the dancers have a clear idea of where they're going, how to execute the movement. And making sure that, as they continue along the way, they also have the strength to go through it. So I can't just throw the choreography out there. We have to build upon it until their bodies are used to it. And then once their bodies are used to it, their stamina is used to it, then they kind of move on and, eventually will get it. But you do have to be aware of that as you go through, both, and again with kids, because kids don't recognize an injury or recognize what's bothering them. And so, you have to kind of sift through that. And then with the second company, a lot of time these dancers, this is the first time they've lived on their own. So they're sorting through a lot of things. They're sorting through those, that portion control as far as, how to maintain a healthy weight for what they need to do. They're working on moving up to the next level. And so, they have to retrain, they have to rework on things. If there's an injury there, they have to strengthen around the injury. So there's a lot involved in getting to the product anyway.
How do you interact with the parents? Whenever there's an injury, within seconds you look up and there are the parents and 3 or 4 other relatives.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, it's just communication, and with these wonderful people on site, we have backup to help us, explain to the parents and also, you know, get an initial diagnosis too.
Yeah, we encourage the parents to be part of it because they need to know what's going on, and that it kind of in the long run, the more we tell them up front, the less they're asking, and it just makes it a little bit more easier. Yeah.
So Jackie, you're the director of Pilates
Yeah.
in dance medicine, and what's the difference? And how does Pilates play in?
We use Pilates as part of rehabilitation. I like the non-weight-bearing aspect of it. I like how it's spring resistant, so I can add tension if they need more. We can take tension away if it's early in their rehab. And we can also do like ballet combinations, ballet moves on the reformer. And dancers love that because they don't want to get out of shape when they're hurt. They want to stay in shape. And then we also use it for conditioning and warm-ups and strength training. So it's we have several pieces down in our athletic training room, and the dancers use it all the time. Yeah.
So, you know, there's this combination of flexibility and strength, and are they mutually exclusive? Are there certain, like, dancers can't go be runners? Are there certain things that dancers, I mean?
They are really flexible. They really are. It's hard because I'm always trying to push them to get stronger, and they say, "Oh, it feels like I'm really tight," and I'm like, "Well, don't confuse getting stronger with feeling tight." Their hamstrings are particularly hyper flexible. But certain muscles are tight, like their calves are tight. So we have to always be reminding them to stretch their calves. Sometimes their quads are tight or their hip flexors are tight. It just depends. Also, it depends on the choreography. But certain body parts need to be a little stronger and certain body parts are a little too flexible. It's just finding that balance. And everybody's just a little bit different, so.
So is that before a performance? You know, how long would you stretch? What would you do to get ready?
As a dancer, I was always one of the first people to the theater to take plenty of time to warm up. The injury that I had as a dancer that ended up being career-ending was a back injury, and so, you know, working through that for many years, you know, I was there early to warm up, to get heat on it, to do all kinds of exercises, you know, very, very basic static-oriented exercises. Just to, you know, to fire up the muscles, get them going, and then be there for a full class. Then you would keep it warm between class and when you went on stage. Then you would go backstage, continue to do more warm-up before you were finally on stage. So it is a long process that the dancers do.
Well, the ballet is an incredible thing to watch, and as you watch the not the team, but the group, you know, you're just incredible. And then the principal dancer comes on stage, and that was you. How do you work your way up to that? That's an incredible thing.
It's physically, it's a day at a time. I really think that you know, kids start out when they're 7, 8 years old. I didn't start till I was 9, which is kind of late for most dancers. But it's that daily ballet class, that hour-and-a-half class. It's the additional training that you do. It's pushing through with choreography and being able to adapt your body to different needs of a choreographer, because sometimes it's very, very different. And in a way, that almost becomes like a different type of training if you're doing one choreographer's work to the other, because one is pulling you in this direction, one is pulling you in that direction. But I think it's a daily process, and just like any athlete, it's just every single day. You know what's expected of you, you know what you have to push forward to do, and it's just maintaining that. Someone once said to me that your good days and your bad days, you know, when you start out, are here, and your job is to take your bad day up there. And I think physically that's a thing that, you know, everyone should or does try and do, you know, if they're athletically inclined in any sport, you know, as well as dance.
Have you ever been going through choreography and a choreographer wanted you to do something or somebody and you couldn't do it? Does that ever happen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they changed the choreography?
A lot of choreographers work with the dancers. They will push you constantly to get it, to get it, to get it, to get it. Towards the end, if they decide, you know, and there are some choreographers that are going to want you to do it no matter what. Others want it to look a certain way and have a certain quality, so they might change it or finesse it a little bit for you or for your body. There's also choreographers that work with, in the same role, a dancer who's 5'2" and a dancer who's 5'7", and make adaptations, you know, to go for the dancer, and as well as their flexibility, strengths, and size, because that, you know, that can work on speed. You know, the taller dancers aren't quite as fast as the smaller dancers, so, you know, there's a lot of factors in that.
Is there really a height that is sort of the right height for a professional ballet dancer?
Kind of depends on what the artistic director wants. And then you have to, when you go up on point, you're 4 inches taller. So if she's matching you with a guy, you can't be taller than your guy. So it kind of depends. And some places, like when I auditioned for Cincinnati Ballet, they had me dancing next to this one girl, and I didn't realize later that she was leaving the company, but we were the same exact size, and then I ended up wearing lots of her costumes. So you have to kind of fit into what's already been built. So, yeah.
So for a typical dance, how long would you rehearse to be ready for that?
Well, each of our productions, or in our season, there's usually a 5-week rehearsal period. So the choreographer would be in on the initial, you know, beginning of that, or the stager would be setting the choreography, setting the steps, and then they would continue to work for a good 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks before it gets to stage. With children, it's longer.
Yeah.
One of the things we talk a lot about in sports is concussions. You ever see a concussion in dance? Do you really?
Yeah, we had one dancer misjudged how far she was throwing her head, and she hit a table and did have a concussion. And then we had one male dancer come off the stage. You know, when you're running off into the wings, the lights are really bright and shining at you, and you kind of lose your bearings, and he went right into one of the booms or the poles that hold the lights up, and he ended up with a concussion too. So it's happened, yeah.
Use Impact and the same things we do for
Yeah.
that. So it's good to be part of a big sports
yeah,
medicine
absolutely,
group.
absolutely.
Well, I just have to say thank you, Jackie Haas. Thank you, Suzette Boyer-Webb. I do want to finish with kind of in the news story. Last season, the Cincinnati Reds had Ballet Day, and principal dancer Servilio Amador, did I say that right?
Yes.
Who left Cuba in 2003. He actually got to throw out the first pitch to his friend,
Right.
Cincinnati Reds closer Arnaldus Chapman,
Yep.
who also defected from Cuba in 2009. It's amazing. Dancers know a lot of athletes.
He did a great job too.
Did he really?
He did a
Fantastic.
tour, and he made it right over the plate. It was good.
Well, okay, that's awesome. And so Mercy Health is kind of, I think we employees get a 20% discount. What's coming up next for the Cincinnati Ballet?
We have our Director's Choice
Oh, that's right,
coming
yeah.
up in a couple weeks, May 8th and 9th, and you get to see a little of everything, classical ballet, some contemporary. It's kind of an exciting program because there's so much out there, and so yeah.
Well, it is great to have a professional ballet of this caliber to talk with you folks. Thank you very much, Jackie
welcome.
Haas,
Thank you.
Suzette. And that's it for another week of Anderson Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Fagans.